I've played tons of Super Nintendo games. After all, that was the console that I grew up on. I didn't own one, but my friends and my cousins did, and some of my best memories came from the 16-bit era of gaming. Today we're going to talk about my top 10 best Super Nintendo games based on cartoons. We did one for the NES era, and it was a good time, so I figured why not. Before we begin though, I do want to introduce something new for everyone in the firefighter community. One of our members, the Daggerman30, had an idea for a weekly challenge, so in honor of that request, I introduced the Dagger Challenge. Dagger stands for Drive Awesome Gaming Goals, Edit, and Release. What does this mean? It means I want you to stoke those flames of retro gaming and nostalgia, and with the creativity you have within your own mind, make your own videos. This week's challenge is to make a short about your pride and joy game from your own collection. Make sure to tag me in the video so that me and Dagger can watch it and choose one person at random for a guaranteed priority video request. Let's make it fun. With that being said, let's get into the list. Batman is one of those superheroes that was always there, and in some ways, it's a litmus test for how old we are. Some of my viewers might remember the Adam West era, or maybe you watched Michael Keaton absolutely knock it out of the park. The younger folks might know Christian Bale or Ben Affleck, but for me, I watched two very specific shows. The first was Batman Beyond, the other was Batman the Animated Series, which ran from 1992 to 1995. Both of those shows were awesome, and both of them had video games, multiple. But we're on the Super Nintendo, so the game I want to bring up is The Adventures of Batman and Robin, a game that was also released for the Sega CD, Genesis, and Game Gear. Now, I will say for what it is, this is a very slow game, but graphically it's impressive. I wouldn't expect anything less from Konami. It's a 2D platformer with 8 levels, and we go around using a plethora of gadgets that we know from the franchise, like the Batarang, grappling hooks, smoke bombs, ninja stars, tons of stuff. For someone who abhors platformers, I think this one stood out, and at least in the context of the episode we're doing today, this deserves to be on this list. Batman does move painfully slow, but if you can get past that, I think you'd enjoy this. There was a time when I was lucky to go to a place where the pizza flowed, the ball pits rustled, and some kid pissed his pants. That place was Chuck E. Cheese. It wasn't often that I had a chance to go, but when I did, it was a magical time. There was an aura of fun there. Sure, the pizza was painted cardboard and the animatronics were laughably cheesy, but the games that were there in the 90s were awesome. And the one I distinctly remembered was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. Now that game had a sequel, and it was on the Super Nintendo. It was known as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time, which was only numbered that way because they wanted continuity from the NES era of games. It was based on the 1987 animated series, and we go through a basic episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where Shredder dispatches Crane to go steal the Statue of Liberty. And there you go, that's our plot. To be honest, this one is tremendously fun and it's a great beat 'em up. It's even more fun with a friend. Alternatively, if you owned a Genesis, which I know it's kind of outside the scope of this video, but I still feel it should be mentioned, this was on the Genesis as well, kind of. It was known as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist, and while it's not the exact same game, many of the elements were shared. This game has a long title and I couldn't fit it in the label, but the proper name of the game is The Flintstones: The Treasure of Sierra Madrox. You remember Flintstones? It was more than just a vitamin. It was a TV show, pretty good one too, from the era of Hanna-Barbera, which for all intents and purposes was the 60s. But the title of the game is based on a 1927 book named The Treasure of Sierra Madre. Now, if you're me, you dreaded playing this because the two Flintstone games on the NES, they really didn't do it for me. But then I popped in the Super Nintendo version for this episode and I was pleased. Taito has historically given a damn about making games fun, and this one was fun to me. The whole story involves the retirement of the great Pooba, the leader of the weird fucking fraternity/cult that Fred and Barney are part of, the Water Buffaloes, and he says that whoever finds the treasure of Sierra Madrox will become the successor, so that's what we do. It's a relatively straightforward platformer and it's fun. Sure, it might be too easy, but who cares? It's a good time. Scooby-Doo is a great cartoon filled to the brim with people who would probably be grossly insufferable if you were locked in a room with them. Scooby-Doo's been around for a long time, all the way back in the late 1960s, again from the minds of William Hanna and Joseph Barbera. This was during the era of kids with zero business solving crimes that would probably get them killed, like Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, the works. The plot is usually the same formula. Weird shit happens, Mystery Inc. is called, Shaggy is zonked out of his mind, his dog talks to them, they find clues, they rig up some Rube Goldberg machine in the ever so common catchphrase, and I would've gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids. And honestly, between me and you, that formula worked pretty well as a medium for a video game. And in the case of the Super Nintendo, we had Scooby-Doo Mystery, made by a company we should all know, Argonaut Software, the creators of the Super Effects chip that would be placed inside of Star Fox. The game is short though, it's about 4 levels. We play as Shaggy and Scooby and our whole job is to go through a traditional episode finding clues. To me, it's like a point and click adventure without the pointing and or the clicking. It's just a solid graphical adventure game. I know it won't be for everyone and that it does have a nasty little learning curve, but I think it was fun from what I experienced. Y'all remember Sailor Moon? That was one of the first anime series I ever watched on Cartoon Network. Plus, with me being a hormonal teenager, the characters of this television show resulted in questionably unsavory Google image searches, but we've all been there. Now, I'm kind of bending the rules here. This was only released in Japan and in Europe, but because the Super Nintendo was known as the Super Nintendo in Europe, I'm including it on this list. Sailor Moon is a beat-em-up, and to me it's a pretty damn good one. We can choose one of 5 different sailor soldiers, and we go through the levels to find Queen Beryl and kick her shit in. Now, the Super Nintendo was inundated with beat-em-ups. Some were great, some weren't so great, but the competitor, the Genesis, had Streets of Rage. And to me, this is one of the games that came somewhat close to that quality if we don't count Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4 or the subpar Spider-Man beat-em-ups, which didn't make this list because they're based on comic books versus a TV show. To me, this is like Final Fight, but more sufferable, and that's a good thing. Also, a point I want to bring up is that this is one of the few games from that era of Sailor Moon that were released outside of Japan. So if you want to stick your head into something fun, this is the one to do it for. There aren't many franchises that came out of the development sector swinging as hard as Tiny Toon games did. I don't know why, but they're tremendously fun. I don't know if it's because Konami was in charge of a majority of the games, but I've yet to find a Tiny Toon game that sucks. Now, this is a sports game, and it was a sports game that supported the SNES multi-tap, so you could have 4 players, which is massive. The events are simple: bungee jumping, running, hammer throw, pie throwing, and other assorted buffoonery. But the key point is, for a game based on a cartoon, this is stupid fun. So if you want a game you can play with your kids, this is it. Trust me. Oh hey, another Tiny Toon Adventures game. Before we go any further, I want to explain what Tiny Toons is. It's basically Looney Tunes, but the characters are alternative versions of the characters we know and love. And it was more so aimed for younger audiences. So instead of Bugs Bunny, we have Buster Bunny. Instead of Lola Bunny, we have Babs Bunny. Plucky instead of Daffy, Hampton instead of Porky. It's just a more modern spin on the characters. In contrast to the previous game though, Buster Bust Loose is a platformer, and it's a very easy one at that. For a platformer, I found this game to be stupid fun, and again, it's approachable for people of all ages. It only has 6 levels, so it's short, it's fun, and yet again, another game that will be great for your kids should you decide to let them pick up the Super Nintendo controller. So many people have brought up this show because I mentioned that I love games that are pirate themed, and for some weird reason, I don't remember this show at all. Apparently it was on ABC in 1991, but I don't recall it at all, and to be honest, I probably would have liked it. But the game is the only exposure I had to the franchise, and let me tell you, this is a solid-ass beat-em-up. To make a comparison, it's a lot like Knights of the Round or the Capcom-era D&D beat-em-ups, but this is Sunsoft, and I was pleasantly surprised because Sunsoft historically has made me want to shit lava. We play as Ren or his two companions Tula or Loz, which by the formula, that makes beat 'em ups what they are. They all have differing pros and cons. But the one thing they all share in common is that they can and will beat the fuck out of anyone who comes their way. I do find it interesting that so many companies took the initiative to create beat 'em ups from IPs. What's crazy is that for the most part, they succeeded. And I appreciate that. So often, franchises were relegated to shitty platformers, so to see a divergence in how these franchises were utilized is refreshing. And I don't know if that's what kids in the 90s wanted or if platformers were starting to fade away prior to 3D Jump, but it's a refreshing change to say the least. Superhero teams were the jam in the 90s, right? You can thank the X-Men for that. And that's just barely scratching the surface. We had X-Factor, Power Pack, Alpha Flight, West Coast Avengers, the New Mutants, and that was only the Marvel side of things. For DC, there was the Suicide Squad, Justice League Detroit, the Teen Titans, new and old. There were tons. But from that insurgence of superhero teams, there was an inspiration for people to create their own that broke away from the usual suspects Marvel and DC. Think of Silverhawks, Thundercats, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Super Friends, yeah, Defenders of the Earth. We even saw one offshoot on the NES with the Defenders of Dynatron City. But this is the 90s, the era of the edgy cartoon. And from the mind of Jim Lee, someone who actually left Marvel, he created WildC.A.T.s. Now, this is yet again another beat 'em up, and it follows the WildC.A.T.s team as they fight the dreaded Demonites, these aliens that are trying to conquer Earth. They are led by Lord Hellspawn, and they're looking for an orb, and that's the extent of what I know about this game. I don't really care much about the plot, as with most beat 'em ups, it's about how pleasing it is to bebop down the street punching the shit out of anything that moves, and with this game, that's all that matters. Aliens show up, we punch them. A lot. Now, this game was developed by Beam Software, so mad props to them, because traditionally, their games are diluted urine. Not a big fan of Beam, so I was pleasantly surprised when this game was functional and also incredibly fun. Goof Troop is a feel-good game that has made so many lists of mine. To me, it's the quintessential couch co-op game for the Super Nintendo, and it was one of the first games created by Shinji Mikami, who would go on to make Resident Evil. And to me, it's one of the best games based on a TV show ever. In the case of Goof Troop, it's the same show, the 1992 run of Goof Troop. Also, Goof Troop paved the way for a movie, a Goofy movie, which was one of the first movies I ever saw in theaters as a kid. So in many ways, this game is awesome. We can play as either Max or Goofy, and we go through the various levels and stages on Spoonerville Island. Our whole objective is to find a pirate ship where Pete and PJ are being held captive. The game requires players to work together to solve basic block puzzles, but the one thing that I can ding it for, if there ever really was anything to ding it for, is that it's a game that was 100% designed to be played by two people. So if you choose to play it alone, it might not be as fun. So bear that in mind if you do decide to check it out. And that's it for today's episode. What cartoon-based games for the Super Nintendo were the best to you? Feel free to tell the community down below in the comments. Who knows, maybe you'll have a shared interest, or maybe you'll expose someone to something awesome. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home in our community. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to subscribe. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.